Welcome to Future Talks. My name is Sturesson, the founder of Resting, a C-suite consulting company with the tagline Advice from the Future. Today we will talk with the world's first professor of intellectual capital, Mr. Leif Edvinsson. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I would say we will discuss on a theme called knowledge anticipation. But before we make a deeper dive on that topic, I think it would be very good to ask a question to you, Leif, about the whole journey about IC and intellectual capital. What is the point with this theme and subject if you're looking back and sitting here today and also portraying some angles of the future? What's the point with IC?
Great question. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I do think that it's not the point.
What is it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We have to find out.
So what is it?
That might be the point.
So what is it we don't know, what we don't know?
Well, it could be, for example, the weight of your brain.
Wow, that could be, I guess, 1.5 kilo maybe?
Yeah, very good. Very
Really?
good. And what's the size of your shoes?
42.
How come that was quicker than the weight of your brain?
I think it's probably because of a culture which is measuring what is easy,
Yes.
not measuring the realities of knowledge.
Yes, very good. Very good. Which means that we are more or less sliding into the future without really grasping the future.
So what would you then say about if I mean, sometimes you and I, we've been traveling around the world, especially when I was global head of PwC in the government sector. We were in Dubai, we were in different places, and when you were flying in, you could see a lot of building cranes. If we look upon these cranes as something about, this is great, it's growth, it's development, it's future, what would you say linked to IC? What are the building cranes in the IC industry, so to speak?
That is also a very intriguing question because it's probably hidden. It might be life science laboratories, but it could also be cyber security hubs, which we don't see.
Yeah.
And it might be sensors in the lamp here that is picking up our conversation and transmitting it to another part of the world.
Will that mean that the future of knowledge, in a sense, is moving from tangible to intangible? Because you say we can't see it, but how could we pick some, would you say, indicators of what is really the future of IC?
The future of IC is probably a slightly different one, but it's a good question. If with your background in music, you can talk about street playing, you can talk about sheet playing, and that might also be relevant for organizations. You follow the rules, but does it give you a good rhythm for the future?
No.
Or is it that the rhythm is overtaking you and your navigation? And that is very valid for many nations of today. They are sliding back, and some other ones are sailing on into the future.
Why is that? Would you say you can say those who are sliding back and those who are sailing on into the future? How do you define who are sailing on? What's the indicators or criteria for we can say these are really moving on, sailing on?
A number of indicators, but starting with whether you are following the stream or if you are going against the stream, and that is the tide.
Okay.
And the tide is actually based on the rotation of the Earth. And the rotation of the Earth has a kind of interesting speed. Do you know how quickly the Earth is rotating?
24 hours?
In 24 hours.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
1,600 kilometers per hour.
1,600?
Yeah.
Wow.
So you have to keep up.
We have to keep up. So how do we catch the knowledge tide
Good.
in the different nations or the different companies or organizations? How do we have an early warning system? Wow, now it's knowledge, or now is the water coming, the tide is coming. Is that a way to describe what
Yes,
we are?
with technology,
Yeah.
you can pick up the tide very well, and you have the weather reports actually, which is based on very qualified systems and mathematics. But the opposite is actually old fortresses that were built for another century.
Yeah. So we have the old way of looking into it. And we've
Yes.
had this GPS
Yeah.
and real-time understanding. But how would you then say, looking out here in different ways, trying to catch the knowledge tide, which you spoke about, how should we interpret and anticipate the knowledge coming?
Well,
or maybe I can say signals, weak signals or strong signals coming. How should we look upon this?
very, very intriguing. We have so many signals coming towards us every day,
Yeah.
but still we learn to read the old story in schools. So I think it starts with the schooling. We have to learn to perceive the signals as well as understand the signals. And that understanding the signals, and then you have to play with the signals, which it might be jamming, it might be something else. But the schooling of young people as well as middle-aged people of perceiving the signals, and you can see it in media interviews today. The journalists are not really trained to ask the questions of the signals.
No.
They want to fill the minutes they have to their interview, and consequently they miss the signals.
So if we try then to give an example of maybe a weak signal, that could be maybe the chat GTP, AI. You ask a question and you get some knowledge. What would you say, linked to what you said about the education and schooling system? How should we look upon these new technologies and knowledge cultivating developers like this AI machines who tells us what is the realities behind a question? How would you interpret this chat GTP linked to what we talk about to find and see the weak signals clearly? What does this mean for us?
When I tested this GPT, I was extremely impressed with how quickly you get a kind of summary of words.
Yes.
But those words are could be verified and should be verified, and to my knowledge, they were fairly correct, but they are not authenticity.
So have you checked out on the GTP, for example, IC intellectual capital?
Yes.
Could you confirm? Yeah, this is right.
Yeah.
This is good. This is really insightful.
Yes, I did.
Okay, you did. Yeah.
But it's missing the nerve of the nerve of the cell, so to say.
Yeah.
You can see the cell.
Yeah.
You can score it, but is it really vibrating?
Could this be? This is very interesting. Could this be that AI, artificial intelligence, needs another AI, authentic intelligence?
Yes, I think so.
Could that be the nerve?
Yes.
You're certifying, you're confirming, you're saying this is it. You add now a human dimension of wisdom, knowledge into this kind of technical. So that's why we are probably, or are we, needed in the future.
Oh, we are actually. Otherwise, there will be no one.
Yeah. Very good.
And that's why we have said it before, that the biggest space for innovation is in the zero.
So for all of us, we can hear the world's first professor of IC, Leif Edvinsson, telling us there is a future because we are needed as creative individuals working together. Collaboration, co-creation, co-design, all of this.
Yes.
So may I also ask you, linked to I mean, you are a futurist, and we talk sometimes about different currencies in the financial sector. It goes up and down, and everything is happening, and people try to explain what is the best currency to really to invest in, and so on and so forth. But what would be, if we use this as a metaphor, what is the currency of the future? Currencies maybe of the future, when you talk about IC and innovation and all this kind of knowledge perspectives.
Great question. I do think it relates to your question. It's the water.
It's the water.
Yes.
Are you back to the tide now again?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in
Explain.
French it's eau de vie.
Eau de vie. The
water of life.
Water of life. Wow,
Yes.
that is interesting.
And it might taste very well, it might be detrimental. And what we see today in some parts of Sweden, we have lost the clear water. We have, because of the flooding, we get brown water. And then you need to use a lot of chemicals to clean the water.
Yeah.
But water might be one of the most important nutritions for tomorrow.
So the access to real, solid eau de vie, or real water, is a key thing.
And you know, solid water, what is that?
Solid water.
What is that?
I must say, I don't know.
Ice.
Ice. That's right.
I see.
I see. So, you know, this is the way we need to think maybe and
Yes.
act, because this is the kind of a knowledge jam about getting metaphors, pictures, and acronyms on different things.
Yes.
So this is solid water. So we can talk about water, solid water, and we can talk about just the air, the fog.
Yeah.
Immense, whatever it's called.
And that's where you're coming back to music, because music is, according to researchers, showing waves. And then consequently you have also waves in smell.
In what?
Smell.
Smell.
So what's the smell of the music?
What's the smell of the music? Yeah.
That's very authentic,
Mm-hmm.
which means that the smell of the music is waves like this.
Yeah.
And in south of France, L'Oréal have big laboratories to research on the waves of the smell, which means that you can actually ask a question: what's the smell of the school? What's the smell of this library? What's the smell of this kitchen and boardroom?
Yeah. So when you come into an old library, you actually get a very certain smell of the old books,
Yes.
the leather and everything, the papers. And could that be interpreted as that smell a cultural reality? Because you feel something when you come into a leadership team or a boardroom or something, and you say, oh wow, you should be, oh here you can be very creative and proactive or whatever. Is that what you talk about, the culture of how you really cultivate and develop knowledge?
Yes, probably. And it looks like when you are afraid and going into a boardroom, stiff, nervous, etc.
Yeah.
And then you have a special smell, which is a slightly more sour smell.
You radiate. That's interesting.
It is.
You can't hide it.
No.
So the question is then, if you say so, how do we go into the future without fear?
We have cinnamon buns.
Okay, cinnamon buns. Okay, explain. What do you mean?
Well, it's the smell of freshly baked cinnamon buns.
Yes.
To reduce the fear.
Okay.
And this is what we used in Scandia Future Center.
In Stockholm.
In Stockholm, yeah. And the whole idea was actually to impact the smell and the fear. And that's why we experimented with the number of senses you have.
Yeah.
And according to modern quantum physics, we have at least 14 different smells. Or
wow.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Let me end with a question here, because we are touching upon so many great things, which has to do with the way we think.
Yeah.
And I would ask you, where and how should we learn to think these bigger thoughts, great perspectives on knowledge, wisdom, and try to perceive a greater future linked to what we're dealing with in our daily businesses or institutions or whatever. What do you say? How and where should we learn to think?
Probably by having experiments, laboratories.
Okay.
And that was very visible many years ago. We could see that the flow of knowledge in a boardroom was very low, almost stiff.
All right.
So that's why we moved some of the deeper questions out of the boardroom and put it into a kitchen.
Okay.
Because there, the fear was...
Chef's Academy of Knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And today you can also digitalize that. So right now we're experimenting with Oracy Lab.
Okay.
And the Oracy Lab, you have literacy when you're reading paper or whatever.
Yeah.
The Oracy is the way you communicate by the voice. So how do you develop the voice communication?
So we need maybe a new type of, in the kitchen, of food tasting. What could be a kind of testing, proof testing knowledge.
Yep.
New dishes.
Yes.
New recipes.
Yes.
So how do we invite people to come into these kitchens without fear, anticipate and perceive a greater future? Is that to start to use different things creating new dishes?
Yep. I was offered such a futurizing dinner in Hong Kong once. And the first dish was walnut.
Walnut?
Yeah, because it looks like the brain.
It looks like the brain. Wow. I remember when I met you, maybe 20 years ago, you told me about when you were a PhD student in Stanford, in US, and you were not really pleased with your grades, and you challenged the professor.
Yes.
Tell us about, because I think this has to do with how should we learn to think.
Brilliant. What I learned was I was not very happy with the feedback loop from the professor. So we had a chat about how to get out of that traditional loop. And then he said, turn the question upside down and search for new perspectives and try to challenge me like I challenged you when we started, because it gives another rhythm. And then we play together with that ingredients we have on the table or in the computer, and that will give the new dish.
All right, that will give a new dish. I also recall from that conversation that it was a perspective of, if you have a perspective of history, you're just trying to quote the old ways of telling the different stories, describing knowledge. And if I'm correct, you said to me, they told you to stop recycling old shit.
Yep.
And try to think a new thought.
Yes.
Which is not evidence-based.
No, not
but
yet.
It's just an idea. Not yet. And I think to me that, wow, that changed my way of thinking completely. Because how should I look all this? It's good to understand, of course, what have you been quoting and not quoting, but it also allowed me really to start to just write, to just think, and say, could it be like this? And open the box for questioning and for challenging what I was saying, linked to an open conversation like you and I having here on a kind of a jazz 4-stroke flow, 120 beat rhythm. Some kind of. So what do you say? How did you learn from that session when this professor told you to think new thoughts?
It might also be called mental tennis.
Mental tennis.
Which means that you are serving a question. And then you smash it back. And if you don't hit the ball exactly, there you have. So that kind of metaphor of having mental tennis is very good, actually. And you can play it with your kids and your family and have great fun, actually.
Yeah. So with this about 15, 17 minutes conversation, I've had a privilege to discuss with Professor Leif Edvinsson, first professor of intellectual capital, IC. I think it's time for us to close. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I would say to all of us here that it's time to anticipate a great future, new ingredients, new recipes, new thoughts, and challenge ourselves to put something new on a new spot and start to invite questions to you and to me and to all of us. So looking forward to see you again, Leif, on different topics.
Yep.
And to see you in some place of the world. So take care, all the best, bye for now.
Happy future.
Happy future.